Hello and welcome to the NPTEL MOOCs course on Foundation for Virtual and Augmented Reality System. We are going to start our next lecture, that is lecture number 5, which will be covering issues and challenges that are there in virtual and augmented reality systems. Before we start, like we were doing in the previous lectures, let us quickly recap what we have covered so far. So, we started our discussion with the basic understanding of the terms, broadly what they mean, what they refer to, and we also had a brief look at the importance, why this knowledge is important, why we should know about these terms, these technologies, primarily from the point of view of the commercial potential, applications and market caps. So, essentially from a commercial standpoint, we tried to understand why this is important. In the subsequent lectures, we went a little deeper. We explained the terms in terms of formal definitions of all the terms that we have come across, namely virtual reality, augmented reality and mixed reality. Also, you may recollect that we used the term augmented reality, we decided to use the terms augmented reality and mixed reality as synonyms. So, they are used interchangeably, which we are going to follow in all our discussions in subsequent lectures. Then we covered again in brief some major application areas. While we are talking about application areas, application domains of individual technologies, we also had seen the characteristics, key defining characteristics we can say of each of these technologies. Now, these defining characteristics could help us to distinguish between say a virtual reality system and a non-virtual reality system, or say an augmented reality system or a non-augmented reality system. Not only that, along with these type of distinctions, we are also able to differentiate between a virtual reality system and a augmented reality system if we know those characteristics properly. So, we covered few of the concepts in details during those discussions. In the last lecture, we learned about the historical evolution of the field, both virtual reality and augmented reality. We covered key milestones that occurred during this journey from the very beginning to the current state of the art. That was what we have covered so far. Now, in this lecture, what we are going to do is we are going to talk about some issues and challenges while dealing with such systems. As is the convention that we are following, so we will start our discussion on issues and challenges for virtual reality system, and in subsequent part of the lecture, we are going to cover the same thing for augmented reality system. So, let us begin our discussion on the key issues and challenges in virtual reality systems or for developing or working with virtual reality systems. In order to understand the issues and challenges, let us quickly recollect the definition of virtual reality. We will be referring to the dictionary definition that we had used in our earlier discussion on virtual reality. So, what definition we used there? Let us quickly recollect. A virtual reality system is an artificial environment which is experienced through sensory stimuli. Note that here we are referring to only two sensory organs, to understand sight and to perceive sight and sound, but in reality we can actually, for full immersion we need to use all our sensory organs. So, an artificial environment which is experienced through sensory stimuli provided by a computer and in which one's actions partially determine what happens in the environment. So, earlier we had gone through this definition and we had broken it down into characteristics, key characteristics of virtual reality system. So, no need to go into that discussion any further. However, what we can say is that based on this definition, we can say that what is an objective, what is the main objective of any VR system. So, the objective is to let user experience artificial environment through sensory stimuli provided by the computer. So, here we are of course extending the definition a little bit. Instead of only sight and sounds, we are saying all sensory organs, we are referring to all sensory organs. So, the overall objective of any VR system we can say is to let user experience the artificial environment through our sensory organs or through the stimuli provided by the computer. That is the objective. Now, it may appear to be very simple. However, this objective actually refers to two important things, which are nothing but the main issues in experiencing VR. So, there are broadly two major issues in experiencing VR. One is the technological. So, we said that we should be able to experience it through sensory stimuli provided by a computer. So, the technological issue is how to generate suitable stimuli to experience the virtual environment or artificial environment, but it does not end there. So, there is one more issue to be considered. What is that? That is psychological. Now, we are saying that through technology somehow we manage to generate some stimuli, suitable stimuli in other words. Now, how to perceive that stimuli suitably? So, that is psychological issue. Technology has nothing to do with it. So, essentially this refers to the role of human factor, how our psychology is made up of, our psychological characteristics. Of course, as you can understand, different people will have different characteristics. So, this perception of stimuli is likely to be different for different users. So, to sum up, there are two major issues. One is technological, how to generate stimuli or rather how to generate suitable stimuli, and one is psychological, how to perceive the stimuli suitably. These two major issues in turn brings us to two major concerns, two important concerns while dealing with virtual reality system or technology or experience. These are concerns that you will come across in almost every literature that deals with such technology. One is called immersion, other one is called presence. Now, let us try to understand what these terms mean. Again, we will go through some definitions and we will try to understand based on the definition what these terms mean. Let us begin our discussion with immersion. What immersion means? Like we have done before while defining virtual reality, similarly let us begin with a definition of immersion. It is not a dictionary definition, rather this is a definition taken from the literature, which says immersion is the objective degree to which a VR system and application projects stimuli onto the sensory receptors of users in a way that is extensive, matching, surrounding, vivid, interactive and plot informing. So, what it says? It says that immersion is the objective degree, a degree of what? Objective degree to which a VR system and application projects stimuli onto our or the human users sensory receptors in a way such that the experience is extensive, matching, surrounding, vivid, interactive and plot informing. This is a definition which was originally proposed by Slater and Wilbur. I will give you the reference at the end of this lecture. So, the terms to note in the definition are objective degree, VR system and application, projects stimuli, sensory receptors of users and of course, the 7 terms, namely extensive, matching, surrounding, vivid, interactive and plot informing. These 6 terms. So, in a nutshell, we can say that immersion is the objective degree which decides the qualities of experience that a user is likely to have while dealing with a VR system, and these qualities are encapsulated in terms of these 6 terms: extensive, matching, surrounding, vivid, interactive and plot informing. Let us try to understand what these qualitative terms mean. So, let us begin with the first term, extensive. So, what it means? It means range of sensory modalities that are presented to the user. The more sensory organs are stimulated with the stimuli provided by the computer, the more extensive the immersion is. That is what this term refers to. What can be the sensory organs? So, we have visual organs, auditory organs, physical force perception, smell, taste, touch and so on. So, when we are talking of immersive experience, the more sensory organs we are using, the more extensive the experience is. That is what this term means. Then comes the second term, matching. What does it mean? So, it refers to congruence between sensory modalities. For example, appropriate visual presentation corresponding to head motion and virtual representation of one's own body should be there. So, when you are moving, say, your head, something in your visual field should move instantly without any delay. Otherwise, you will not get the perception that actually you are moving your head or your field of view. And this type of match between user's physical movement and the movement in the virtual world is called matching. So, matching should be there while you are walking in the virtual world through some movement in the physical world, or changing your field of view as I just explained, or say moving your hand in the physical world So, similar things which lets you perceive that you are moving your hand should happen in the virtual world, and so on and so forth. Then comes the third quality, that is surrounding. It is the extent to which cues are panoramic, the extent to which cues are panoramic. So, that is the meaning of this term surrounding. In other words, the extent of, say, when we are talking of visual senses, extent of field of view. When we are talking of auditory senses, the extent of our perception about auditory source, and so on. So, wide field of view as compared to narrow field of view refers to more surrounding experience as compared to less surrounding experience. So, when I use the term wide field of view, I am essentially referring to the quality more surrounding as compared to when I am using the term narrow field of view. So, that refers to the quality less surrounding. Then vivid, what it means? The quality of energy stimulated within particular modality. So, earlier we talked about using different modalities. Now, the vivid quality refers to the fact that within each of those modalities, how much energy we are stimulating. That means, how much energy the computer is generating to stimulate that sensory organ. So, this quality is related to factors such as resolution, lighting, frame rate, audio bit rate. The more the better, as is obvious. So, if we have more resolution, then our visual perception would be better. If we have more audio bit rate, then our auditory perception will be better. If we have more lighting conditions, varied lighting conditions, brighter lights, then our visual perception will be better. So, vividness means these type of things that enhances our perceptions through each of the sensory modalities. In other words, we can say that more resolution means more vivid immersion, more bit rate means more vivid immersion, and so on. Then comes the quality of interactivity. So, when I say interaction or interactive quality, what it means? It is among these 6, this is probably the most obvious one, that is capability of user to make changes to the world, response of virtual entities to user actions, and users' ability to influence future events. Interactivity in a nutshell refers to our ability, our means the user's ability to interact with the virtual world, not only one-way interaction, to understand the response, and also ability to change the future events, ability to influence the future events. So, if you recollect, in our definition of VR, we said one of the defining characteristics of any VR system is interactivity. So, that is also reflected here. Finally, we come to the last quality, that is plot informing. Now, this is very interesting. So, what this quality refers to is that through our interaction or other qualities, whether we are getting a feel of how things are happening, how things will happen in future. I mean the consequences of our actions, whether we are able to understand or comprehend or predict the consequences. In other words, it refers to the story of the entire experience. So, here it is assumed that the experience is nothing but a story, a scripted story. As the scripts, as the story, I mean each of the instances changes through user interactions, the story unfolds. The plot informing quality refers to our ability to understand the overall story, not only the current instance what is happening, but the overall story, overall script. The more we are able to apprehend the script, the story, the more plot informing the experience is. So, it refers to the story, which in other words refers to the consistent portrayal of a message or experience, dynamic unfolding of sequences of events, behavior of world and its entities, whether the user is able to understand, comprehend or predict those things. That is collectively we can say is referring to the understanding of the story. So, the more we understand the story, the more plot informing it is. The less we understand the story, the less plot informing the experience is. Now, that was about immersion, which is the technological aspect or technological issue for VR. So, just to summarize, there are two issues, technological and psychological, and correspondingly there are two terms we refer to, immersion and presence. Immersion refers to the technological issue. When we say we want to immerse or we want to generate an immersive experience for the user, essentially we are referring to the technological side or the systemic side, which is captured in terms of these 6 qualities, and immersion refers to the objective degree to which these qualities are imparted to the user, and these qualities refer to activation of one or more sensory organs in suitable way. Now, that is the what technology can do. Let us come to the psychological side, that is presence. We may generate immersive qualities, but whether we will be able to perceive that or not, or whether the user will be able to perceive that or not, that is another issue which is captured by this term presence. What is the definition says? So, this definition is taken from International Society for Presence Research. It was there since 2000. What it says is, presence is a psychological state or subjective perception in which, even though part or all of an individual's current experience is generated by and or filtered through human made technology, part or all of the individual's perception fails to accurately acknowledge the role of the technology in the experience. So, it is a little bit complicated. Let me go through it again. A psychological state or subjective perception, that is the first thing to note, in which even though part or all of an individual's current experience is, so whatever the individual is currently experiencing, either partly or fully, is generated by or filtered through human made technology, part or all of the individual's perception, so whatever we are perceiving at that moment, fails to accurately acknowledge, note this term, the role of the technology in the experience. So, essentially what it means is that it is a psychological state, number one. Number two, in this state we are getting input from technology, from computer, which is stimulating our sensory organs. So, we are perceiving something. However, presence means that our perception should be as good as perceiving the reality. That means, we should not be able to distinguish between our perception of stimuli generated by a computer vis-a-vis our perception of stimuli generated from the real world. We should not be able to distinguish between the two. If that type of perception is happening, then we say that we are having a presence in the environment. So, in other words, we can say that a computer is generating stimuli which is stimulating our sensory organs, but we fail to acknowledge that these are generated by computer. Instead, we perceive them to be coming from real world. So, in other words, we are perceiving that we are already in the real world, nothing changed. That means, we are unable to distinguish between virtual world and real world. That is presence. That is the perfect presence, rather to say. So, how these two are related, immersion and presence? Immersion can be an objective and quantifiable description of what any particular system can provide or does provide, whereas presence is a state of consciousness or the psychological sense of being in the virtual environment. So, immersion is what the technology gives us. We can measure or we can comprehend what the technology can provide. However, when we are talking of presence, it is inside the user's mind. There is no direct manifestation of it. It is difficult to objectively measure. So, subjective experience has to be taken into account. That is the major difference between these two concepts, immersion and presence. Now, as probably by now is obvious, presence can be a function of both user, that is the subjective experience, as well as immersion, that is the objective or technological experience. So, immersion aids presence, but it does not mean that if we provide immersive technology, then presence will automatically happen. Immersion is capable of producing presence, but not necessarily always. Say for example, you are asking a user to experience a virtual reality system, you ask the user to wear the headsets and do all the things, all the interactions that are supported by the system. But if the user simply keeps the eyes shut, then and imagine that he or she is in some other place, then all these technological things will come to a naught. It will mean nothing. So, user can simply shut eyes and cut himself or herself off from that virtual experience. So, immersion is still there, but presence will not be there. On the other hand, presence can be limited by immersion. The greater immersion a system or application provides, the greater potential for a user to feel present in that virtual world. The lesser the immersive technology provides, the lesser is the presence. That is there. However, as we have just seen that immersion does not ensure presence, but immersion can aid enhanced perception of presence. So, with this knowledge, we can say that overall goal of any virtual reality system is to create high degree of presence, or in other words, to make users feel that they are really in the virtual world, but they are unable to distinguish between the real world and virtual world. So, earlier we said the goal is goal of a VR system is to give immersive experience. Now, we are refining and saying that the goal is to create high degree of presence, because now we know what is presence and what is immersion. Now, to create high degree of presence, we have to have a system that provides high degree of immersion, and that is a systemic issue. So, with that we have come to the end of this part of the lecture, where we have covered few important concepts, namely the technological challenge and the concept of immersion, the psychological challenge and the concept of presence, and how they are related, how they are different, what are the things to be considered while creating an immersive experience, and what is the overall goal of any VR system. But that is not all, not immersion and presence are not the only issues that are afflicting any VR experience. There are other issues also, as well as there are issues for AR systems as well. Those we will be taking up in our next part of the lecture. And these are the references from where those terms were taken and definitions were taken. If you go through them, you will get to know more about these concepts. The second one, that is Slater and Wilbur 1997, this is one of the earliest papers related to this topic, and I strongly suggest that you go through this reference to get a better understanding of how things were dealt with at that point of time. So, with that we have come to the end of this lecture. I hope you have enjoyed. We will cover the other things related to issues and challenges in the next part. Till then, goodbye, thank you and happy learning.